Welcome to the video on creating and managing recipes on your BDX BatchMATIC fertigation system. Let's get started and go to our Fertigation tab. On our Fertigation tab, we'll have our recipes and our chemical pumps tabs. First, let's get started on the chemical pumps tab and make sure that we have all of our different chemical pumps configured correctly. On the chemical pumps tab, we have different tiles for each of our different pumps. Opening up one of the different pumps, we can see the stock properties in the stock part manager. We'll want to make sure that our stock description is set. Our default recipe type is set. So if this is a nutrient part, we want to select nutrient. If it's a pH component, we'll want to select pH up or down. Or if it's an ORP additive, we would want to select that as well. If we're not using this particular pump, it's going to be left in the off condition. In this case, our base A is a nutrient. We'll want to select the default dosing group. Dosing group is the order in which the chemicals will go into the water. This is specific for the nutrient parts. So we can have multiple different nutrient components that are configured for the same dosing group, and they'll go into the water at the same time. However, if we want our nutrients to go into the water in sequential order, we'll have to set them into different groups. For this one, I'm going to set it to Group B. Additionally, you'll want to set your stock tank properties and costs so that your stock levels, notifications, and your cost analytics are accurate. However, this is not required for creating recipes. Once we're done, we'll want to press Save and close out of our stock part manager. Once we've ensured that all of our stock parts or chemical pumps are set up correctly, we can move to our Recipes tab. On the Recipes tab, we have a top bar with a drop-down. The drop-down allows us to select from the different recipes that we've already created on the machine. We can edit them, we can copy them, we can also delete them. If you would like to sort the order of the recipes in the list, there is also a button for sorting the order. Let's get started by creating a new recipe. We'll press the New button. We can save whatever recipe name we want. We'll call it Flour Recipe 1. Below that, we have target values for each of the different sensors on the machine. First, we'll want to set our conductivity target. This machine works in microsiemens or ppm. Microsiemens is 1,000 times millisiemens, what is commonly called EC. So in this example, a 1.5 EC is equal to 1,500 microsiemens. Next, we'll want to configure our pH dosing options. We'll want to select whether we want pH to adjust before nutrients and or after the nutrients. Most commonly, pH is adjusted after nutrients are injected. However, some manufacturers require that the pH be adjusted prior to injecting any nutrients. If we have ORP probes, we can set a target millivolt value. Below our sensor targets, we have our different chemical components. There's a tile for each of the different chemical components. When we create a new recipe, the defaults from the stock components that we configured on the Chemical Pumps tab are pre-populated into the recipe to save us time. We can then go through and edit the different recipe parts. Nutrient components can be dosed in two different methods, by volume or by target. The traditional method is by volume, which is straightforward. Most manufacturers will provide a recipe with the ratios required for each of the different components based on the schedule of the growth. In this case, we're going to put in 2.5 milliliters per gallon of this particular component. If we wanted there to be a delay after this component was added to the water, we can set a delay to allow it to mix in before proceeding to the next parts. So we'll save this recipe part and move on to our next one. For this recipe part, let's demonstrate dosing by target. Let's say our base A we want to get to a 1.5 EC, but in this machine it's in microsiemens, so 1,500 microsiemens. We'll leave the injection rate at the default, which is going to run the pump at full speed. This will allow for the fastest batch. We'll save this part, and let's move on to our next one. In our base B, we're also going to run this to a certain target. However, now we want to bring it up to a 3.0. In this case, I'm also going to set a lower injection rate. I know this chemical is really strong, and I want to slow down the injection so I don't overshoot it. Finally, I want to add a mix delay in here after my B is complete before I add any more additives. I'm going to put in a 2-minute delay. We'll save that part and close the editor. We can now see that our settings are being shown in the different tiles for the chemical pumps. In our recipe, the machine is first going to dose CalMag, which is in group A. It's going to put in 2 milliliters per gallon. So depending on the event and how much we're making, it's going to multiply this ratio against the amount of gallons that are in the batch. Once that's done, the machine's going to move on to our group B component. In this case, it's our base A. It's going to run this pump at full speed until it reaches a target of 1500 microsiemens, or 1.5 EC. Once that's done, the machine's going to move on to anything in group C. In this case, it's our base B. It's then going to proceed to run that pump until the EC runs up to 3000 microsiemens. After that, it's going to delay and mix the water for 2 minutes before adding anything else. We'll want to continue on and configure the rest of our different components. If we don't want to run a component, we can simply set that part to off in our recipe. For our pH up and pH down components, we'll want to set an injection rate. This is different than the milliliters per gallon that we set for nutrients. The injection rate is telling the machine how many milliliters every minute you want to put in while it's attempting to correct. For pH chemicals, we often start with something small, like 5 milliliters per minute. If it's taking too long to adjust your pH, you can increase this value. Once we have the injection rate set, we can save our part and close. We'll want to do the same thing for a pH down component if we have one of those. Now once we've set all the different components up on all the different pump tiles, we can also make sure that we have all of our set points correct. Now our target, we should probably set to 3000 because that's what we have set for the parts in our recipe. The system's going to look at this conductivity value as well as these pH targets at the end of the batch. For more information on how the system will check the batch at the end, see the video on the dosing options and alarms. Now if we want to create a variation of this recipe and maybe make some minor changes, we can simply press the copy button and we have a new copy of the recipe. We can change its name, edit the values, we can change the settings for each of the different recipe parts. And when we're done, we can save our recipe. So copying and editing recipes can be done very quickly. Finally, we can select the different recipes in our drop-down to go back and edit or view the different recipes that we've created. And this concludes the video on setting up recipes on the BDX BatchMATIC system.